Hello, you beauties. Welcome back to the Indigo Rose Lounge. I'm your host, Alyce Dylan. As always, it's glorious to have you here. There's love and acceptance and wholeness and joy here for you if you're willing to receive it in abundance. Today's topic is religion, which, oh gosh, it feels like wading into a cesspool, doesn't it? And I don't mean that I'm going to do a diatribe on religion like I know what's good and what isn't. This is a personal journey, every single one of us. Religion, what it does, what it's about, how it speaks to us, if it does, all of that. What I'd like to look at is the experience of many indigos, sensitives, HSPs, etc., empaths, on the road of usually childhood is when it starts, and the role of religion in their trauma, which often is present, and the resulting rejection of formalized spiritual institutions. And I see it a lot with clients who come to me. A lot of indigo children were raised within religious paradigms of one sort or another. And many of the formalized religions don't have a space of acceptance for individuals who see more than they, in inverted commas, should. So, young children of indigo persuasion who are connected to their spiritual perception and talk about, oh, grandpa's sitting over there and he wants to know. And then all the adults freak out and everyone pretends that didn't happen. And the indigos learn really early on that that's not wise, that we shouldn't say that. And if we know that person's lying, we maybe mention once why are they not telling the truth, and then we get that reaction from them. And especially in formalized religious circles, that can result in an extreme reaction of, now the child is a witch and needs to be cleansed. I've heard the most bizarre things coming out of that. So if you're in Europe and you were part of a formalized religious group, it may be that the priest or the religious leader of whatever kind does some kind of ritual and banishes what they think is a demon, but really what they just do is they teach us that sharing our perception, sharing our reality, sharing what we see is not acceptable, and it does the job, because after that we don't share anymore about granny or grandpa or whoever it is that we are seeing or speaking to, or any of the information we are receiving, unless we slip up and then we get backlash again. So many people that I consult with have had the backlash of formalized religion, and therefore, as they come into adulthood, they reject everything about institutional religion, and with that, the whole concept of God. God becomes a swear word, and anything that belongs in that category needs to go. Now, occasionally, and I have a handful of clients like this, occasionally a child will have a genius idea, and instead of saying, Grandpa says that your car keys are in your wallet, when the whole household is running around looking for them, they figure out it's best to say, God told me. God told me that your keys are in your wallet. And then they become a little prophet. And that is a whole other road with all of its own trauma and its own issues. But in general, if you're part of a formalized religious group, if you just don't, I suppose it comes down to if you lie, but is it a lie? I don't know, it's a fine line. I'm not saying God isn't involved in the whole process somewhere, but if Grandpa tells me, take that parking space or turn here, that parking space is going to be available, I know it's Grandpa. So I could say to a formalized religious person, God told me, and I don't know that am I lying? I don't know, it's a fine line. But if I say it was grandpa, then I need an exorcism. If I just say, God told me, now I'm a prophet and I need to be celebrated. So there are many pathways with religion that the indigos, especially up to your clairs and the mediums, your clairvoyants, clairaudience, we have to navigate that world quite carefully. And for some it goes right and for some it goes severely wrong. I also have a client who was thrown into the spiritualist church. His grandparents and parents were spiritualists. And he was put into a circle when he was 6 years old, or even younger than that. And he was an indigo, and he is now, to this day, as far as I know, an uncontrolled channel. So you can show up at his house on any given day, and there will be someone else walking around in his human vehicle. So that caused all sorts of problems because as a child, he was thrown into circle, blown open, and other souls from the next world were invited by the adults to use him as a channel, to use him as a medium, and he was never taught how to prevent it. And so he became an uncontrolled channel. And one of the biggest problems is a lot of the people that have been with him for many years, for example, do not drive very well. They're of an age where cars were not a thing. And so they'll pop in while he's driving and he's uninsurable because he will have accidents. So the point here is that a lot of institutional experience of indigos is not good. It's not great. And so you get to this spiritual awakening and you're now hearing or receiving information. Let's say you've gotten into your adulthood, you survived the gauntlet, you've gotten into your adulthood, and now you've got all this confusing empathy, you've got receiving information, and you really would do well to have a spiritual practice. I've found that most indigos that have a solid spiritual practice of one or another kind are some of the most stable, benefit best from their spiritual perception, have a context into which to receive information, and they do well. But a lot of indigos are cut off from that because of their experiences in childhood. So it's something we really, as a community, we really need to heal, because having a spiritual base, having a belief in a higher power, having a connection with source can be so beneficial. Even if you just take the basics, like being a yoga practitioner, being a meditation practitioner, some form, some practice that will hold you in your essence. These are vital. And, I've had experiences with clients where they have been deeply church committed people with a deep love of their religious path and with the deep love of God and deep love of Christ. And they awaken and realize they are mediums or clairvoyants or just empaths, intuitives. And they come to see me in terror that they will now be rejected by their community, by everything that they love. And usually they come to me to figure out how to turn it off. But that's really not the healthiest of solutions. And so instead, we try to navigate a pathway that allows them to be their authentic self, but maybe without overwhelming the spiritual community that they're a part of, and maybe just using perspectives that are gentle. Out there, we have wording that is so controversial. You can imagine showing up to a Sunday service and announcing to everybody, I am a baby of an archangel, or I'm a baby of an alien, or, no, some of this, I came to Earth to rescue the planet. Wow. And then, yeah, and then the community's going to really try to help. They're going to call the men with the little white van and the white coats. So a lot of this is about navigating social paradigms. But I do wish that religious organizations would reevaluate that. They would look at the scriptures that specifically make room for condemnation of indigos and of the spiritually perceptive, and perhaps reassess that. We know now that there was a mistranslation inserted, especially into biblical scripture, and this you can search online. I'm not going to go into it, but there is one quote that is, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live." But when you go back to the original transcript of that, it's the witch word is specifically referring to a group of individuals that were around at the time who were poisoners. The modern equivalent would be more like a pharmacologist, to be honest, than a witch in that sense, because they didn't have witches in the way that we understand them in those days. And that specific word referred to poisoners, to people whose sole job in life was to make poisons, the sole purpose of which was to kill other people. And so you can understand why that hotline would exist. But because of the mistranslation of that word, and it was purposefully mistranslated because in the expansion of Rome into various areas, there were local mystics, witches, if you will, that were deeply problematic to the political class and to the military actions and expansions. And so the church did their bit by condemning those people through scripture. It's just a part of history. You know, you can look it up. It's not a controversial subject anymore. But the perception of people has rather become anti anyone who has anything more than their five senses. And so it would be good to, within their limitations, knowing that spiritually perceptive individuals are limited by their ability to translate, and not everything they say is going to be accurate, not everything they say and receive is going to be true, but understanding their experience as being greater than your limited five senses. I really do wish there were more spiritual homes for the spiritually perceptive that were more welcoming and more loving. But if you cannot find one, please consider creating one for yourself. Find the pathway that feels true for you. Find the religious observance or the spiritual practice that you resonate with. And even just privately, give yourself some anchoring in one of those pathways. It really does help for the spiritually perceptive to give themselves a form that can hold their essence and help them to remain stable and secure and faith-based, because ultimately faith is a very, very powerful tool. All right, darlings. So there's the overview of religion and the spiritually perceptive. Let's hope those things will get better, right? Over time, we hope that things will get better and better, and the spiritually perceptive will be acknowledged, not as a label, but as ourselves with our unique and limited abilities. We're not always right. We interpret wrong all the time. And we're not a superior race at all. We are just on the front line of the evolution of humanity. That's all we are. Everybody's coming this way. Everyone's going to catch up at some point, and we're just in the front line, forging new territory. And if we can do it right, then we lay the groundwork for the people who come after us to do even better. So, with that, just remember to love always.